Hey guys, it's Sebastian here from Noble Frugal Studio. Today I'm going to teach you how to make your animations flow more naturally. In order to get the most out of this tutorial, you're going to want to be familiar with the 12 principles of animation, and you're going to want to know how to use animation software. The program that I'm using is called OpenTunes. I use it because it's completely full-featured, and best of all, it's free. You can use whatever software you like, as long as you have the ability to draw on frames and retime and reorder them. So I want to clear something up about smooth animation and natural, fluid, flowy, good-looking animation. Many people use the term smooth when referring to high-quality animation that has a nice flow to it, but I think this term can be a bit misleading because it gives the illusion that the smoothness or the amount of in-betweens that an animation has is what makes it look so good. In actuality though, what makes an animation look really good or move with flow is the fluidity of the animation, which encompasses the arcs the movement is following, the use of ease in and ease out, and the spacing of the drawings in a sequence. I like to use the term fluid because when you think of a fluid or a liquid, you already picture a waving motion, which just arcs put together. I also picture easing in and easing out, like when the ocean comes up to meet the shore on the beach. It eases out to the shore, and then it eases back into the rest of the body of water. Therefore, how smooth an animation is really doesn't lend as much to the quality as you may think. Your animation can be smooth with tons of in-betweens and easing in and easing out, but if it doesn't have flow or it doesn't follow a natural arc, it's not going to look good. So, with that out of the way, let's take a look at the components of a good animation that will lend to a very appealing result. Number 1 is strong keyframes or strong key poses. Number 2 is extreme poses. Number 3 is adding breakdown poses or passing poses. Number 4 is spacing out your drawings well on the timeline. And finally, number 5 is well-planned in-betweens, which is where you introduce easing in and easing out. Before we get started, I want to mention that this tutorial is going to focus on character animation. When it comes to animating things like water and fire, these principles discussed here can still apply, but in a different way that may be hard to understand at first. For those types of movements, there may be other techniques that can work better for, more free-forming, straight-ahead animation sort of things. Okay, the first component we need is strong key poses, and don't just draw whatever comes to your mind when it comes to making your keyframes or your key poses. These essential drawings are what tell the audience what is happening in an animation. For example, the animation that I'm going to be making today is my character Kimi reacting to a shocking situation. To convey this to the audience in its simplest form, we have Kimi's neutral pose and then her shocked pose. These two drawings are the most important ones of the entire sequence. Therefore, they have to be drawn well, they have to be on model, they have to be interesting, and they have to tell a story. Okay, here are our key poses. As you can see, I infused some natural arcs within them. So this is sort of an arc like this in that pose. And then also this one switches into like a counter pose and introduces the opposite arc. That'll add a dynamic feel to our animation that I think is definitely needed for subtle motions like this one. Alright, so I just did some corrections on our key poses. Now we can move on to the next step, which is our extremes. Extremes are the poses that come right before a change in movement or a change of motion. They're best understood as the main poses of our animation. But aren't the key poses the main poses of an animation? Yes, which means that your key poses can be extremes. The difference is that key poses are the drawings that tell our story. Extremes are the main poses of the motion itself. In short, keyframes can be extremes, but extremes don't have to be keyframes because they may not be relevant to the story. For example, if we have a character running from right to left, then all we need is 2 keyframes to convey to the audience what's happening. However, our extremes would be each time the runner's foot contacts the ground, since the legs will be then changing direction and starting a new motion, basically lifting off again. The extremes we're going to be using for this animation are an anticipation and then an overshoot. If you know the 12 principles of animation, then you'll probably be familiar with anticipation. Basically, it's that most actions start in the opposite direction to wind up or gain the momentum needed in order to travel in the intended direction. This is best explained with a jumping motion. No one jumps by just lifting off the ground. They bend down first, anticipating the jump, and then they spring up into the air with the energy they gained. Overshoot is the same thing on the opposite end of the motion. The motion will go further than intended and then settle into its final pose after. This would be like our jumper landing and then standing up again. So here are my extremes. First we have Kimi's confident pose. So she goes down. I wanted her to go down on this anticipation because she's moving upwards in the opposite direction. So I used a down pose so she can wind up that energy to go upwards. Then we have this pose, and right before this pose is the overshoot. So we have her sort of really sort of worried and then settling into sort of confused and in disbelief. So we have the keyframe, winding up energy, overshoot, and then keyframe 2. We have A, extreme, extreme, B. And already, like if it play this animation, like just kind of scroll through it, it already looks really good. Like we already have a very dynamic animation. And what you'll notice is that while I was drawing, I wasn't using a lot of onion skin. Instead, I was flipping back in between my extreme, the pose I wanted to be the extreme, and the key pose. And this allowed me, because if I just did this with both onion skin on, I could draw and I can make an extreme. I could sort of overshoot that pose, but flipping back in between, I think it allows you to create the movement more naturally. I learned the flipping in between your drawings from a YouTuber named Tonico Pantoja. He advised that people, instead of using onion skin all the time, and actually instead of relying on onion skin, that you flip between your drawings. So I tried that here, and I gotta say, it definitely worked. I didn't really know how I was going to attack these extremes, and so far they look really, really good. Now we can move on to breakdowns, and breakdowns tell us how the motion got from point A to point B. They're the middle pose between 2 keyframes or extremes. In our example, they're going to be between 2 extremes, the down pose and the up pose. Breakdowns are really, really important because they tell us what happens during the transition from point A to point B. So we're putting our breakdown between the extremes before A and B. So we can call this A. This is the A pose. This and this is B, right? Extremes will be A1. I'll put a little pow effect called, because they're extremes, they're extreme, and this will be B1. What happens during the transition between A1 and B1? Does the head turn to the left? Does it turn to the right? Or is it exactly in the middle between A1 and B1, something like this? Does it favor the first extreme? Say it's closer to A1 than it is to B1. Is the middle position closer to A1, like something like this. And lastly, does it favor B1? Does it favor this extreme over here? Is it closer to that one? Does it look more like it? This is purposefully not putting it in the middle to achieve a certain effect. Breakdowns are also where we introduce the arc of our animation. So we have Kimi going down and then going back up. I plan to make my breakdown cause an arc going this direction, so somewhere around here. We're probably going to end up putting it in the exact middle. So flipping in between these drawings, you can kind of see the arc laid out, so kind of like round like this. You can definitely see it with the eyes. To keep the in-betweening simple, we should probably just make it right in the middle. Basically what you want to do when you're making a breakdown is maintain that arc. So if we take this corner of Kimi's face right here, we want to track it. So we have it's here, then the breakdown, and then here. So it makes an arc formation, kind of like that. We want to make sure we maintain arcs on each of our features too. So our eye will probably be drawn somewhere around here, so we can maintain the arc between all three drawings. We also want to make sure that we maintain the same amount of volume when we do this. I think that's one of the problems about using onion skin, is that sometimes you don't get all the same amount of volume in a drawing. So we have a nice arc going, I think, with the top of this shape. So her shape is sort of like a cylinder like this, and then I add the sides after. And that's really important when you're animating your characters, to break them down into primitives like that. Right now I have Kimi, she's sort of just cylinder, and she has the same sort of inverted thing for her body. And then her head's kind of like this, and she has big old eyes like that. Definitely important to break down your characters like that, so it makes them easy to animate. Yeah, I'm gonna restart on this breakdown. I think I need to make it a better middle position. So we're gonna use no onion skin this time. I think using that kind of sabotaged me a little bit. And so I just put little dots to trace my arcs, and that's definitely working. I do want a middle position, so let's do that. Let's see. I think putting the dots really helps, because it helps you to see the arc, and it helps you kind of see where the in-between would be. So let's do the same for the top corners of the head. I definitely think that's better than last time. Yeah, I don't recommend using onion skin on there. In order to maintain your arcs, it's better if you just flip between your drawings. If you guys like drawing demos like this one, then definitely let me know, because I'm already having a lot of fun making it, and I would love to make more if you guys enjoy it. Also, for your anticipation and overshoot, I forgot to mention this during the extremes. If your character's more cartoony, don't be afraid to add some squash and stretch. Like, we could easily squash Kimi's head into something like this. Make this really exaggerated. But I don't really want this to have that cartoony effect. We can do the same here. We can just stretch it a ton. Like that, something like that. I don't want this to have that effect, but you can do that if you want. If you have like a more cartoony character, then I recommend doing that. I don't know if I do it a lot in Pi, probably just subtly, because Castle Dark is a cartoon, but it's not like super cartoony, if you know what I mean. I kind of want these arms to spring up to this extreme, so I'm going to have them lag behind just to add some weight to the animation. See, so the hand goes from down here to up there, so I want this sort of arc motion. I'm going to have them drag behind just a little bit, so it's not going to be a middle position. It's going to drag. Alright, so as you can see, we got a really nice arc going with the hand. It kind of swoops up. It's kind of delayed. It's not really in the middle. It kind of swoops up and then tucks here, but we want to just make sure that we're maintaining arcs. So parts of the body move before others. Usually for arm movements at least, your elbow is moving first. So as you can see, the elbow is kind of leading the arm back into this pocket. And we can even do some more of that when we do the in-betweening. So watching it now, that looks really, really good. With just our keys, our extremes, and our breakdown, adding in-betweens is just going to give the animation the rest. It's going to give it all that it needs. We already have the arcs figured out. We already have our breakdown. All we need to do now is time our animation and then add our slow in and slow out via in-betweens. I hope you guys enjoyed this first part of how to make fluid animation. Next week, I'm going to post the second part, which goes over how to time and in between your animation so you can achieve a very natural and appealing result. If you like these types of videos, don't forget to leave me a like. That'll help this video get out to more people, and also leave a comment. You can also check out my Patreon page where I posted another animation breakdown exclusive to the Hog tier. Overall, this project has produced the best tutorials I've ever made on this channel, so stay tuned for part 2, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace. Special thanks to Owen Art for supporting this channel on Patreon. If you want to see sneak peeks and the latest news about my upcoming short film Castle Dark, you can gain access to all Patreon exclusives behind the scenes posts for just $1 a month. All you gotta do is follow the on-screen link to my Patreon page. Thank you in advance.